Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're on air now. As usual, we need to thank God, give God the thanks and praises for being able to be here. Right? We mustn't take it for granted. You woke up this morning, you are healthy. God watch over your you while you were sleeping, right? A lot of people sleep. A lot of people do sleep and they don't wake up, right? As we were sleeping, God was watching over our heartbeat, controlling everything, sending his angel to watch over you. Because the devil is like a roaring lion. The devil move around, right? But with God's protection, nothing can happen. So all these blessings, we don't need to take it for granted. We must always be grateful, right? I was reading it, I was listening to a preacher. He said, a grateful heart, listen. They say a grateful heart in faith moves heaven, right? When you are grateful, right, and you are prayerful in faith, it moves to heaven. It's like your child coming to you now to ask you of something. He say, Mommy, I thank you for what you've done for me. You bought this thing for me. And I know you're gonna say buy this thing for me. Thank you, Mommy. With that, you will fight hard to make sure that you are able to provide that thing to the child. So we must learn how to show gratitude to God. Even if what you are asking is not there yet, but because of the faith you got in Him, show that gratitude. Say, God, I thank you for what you provided for me, for what you've been doing in my life, for what I'm still doing now, and what you will still do for me in future. You know. So when you practice it, you see that your ways will be open, doors will be open for you. Right. Okay, guys, that is that. And as we always do, we humbly ask for God's wisdom to give us the clarity, to guide us, for us to be able to understand what we are going to learn now. Because if the clarity is not there, we're not going to understand. Right? So, yeah, we thank Him for everything. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on the last topic now. The last topic of the year, of the program. Let me say of the program. The last lap of the race. When you are running the last lap, you need to brace up yourself, right? Even if you are getting tired or the devil is trying to infuse a negative thought in your brain, and you say, devil, get behind me, right? Look at the finish line. I'm already there. So don't give up. So we've talked about project evaluation, right? Coincidentally, also, project evaluation is the last topic here, and it's very, very important. You see, we do carry out project evaluation in a project for you to be able to establish whether what you've done is in accordance to what you set out to do, right? At the end of the project, in most cases, right? But some people do argue. There is another school of thought that said project evaluation mustn't be only at the end of the project. Right. So based on what I'm going to teach you here, project evaluation takes place 3 times in a project. Don't forget, 3 times in a project. One at the beginning of the project. No, not at the beginning, at the middle of the project, right? Right, which is mostly focused on the monetary. Then you do another project evaluation at the end of the project, right? Then after a few months, then you after a few months of completing the project, you do another evaluation. Okay, let me try to refine it for you so that you understand again. To remove the ambiguity. I said you do three types of evaluation in the life cycle of a project, right? The first one is during the implementation stage. You are still implementing, you are still executing the project. You need to do evaluation to see what you're doing, whether you are doing it right. The project is not completed yet, right? For example, you look at the planning stage, right? You see what you've planned, whether it's being implemented, right? You look at the resources, you look at your progress to see whether you are progressing as it is required. Do you understand? So those are what you need to focus on at that stage, which means the project is still going on. Does it make sense to you? That is the first one, right? Perhaps few months after you started the project. Then the second one is at the end, shortly after the end of the project. You just completed the project, right? Now you want to evaluate it, to review it. We call it, of course, you can use that language review. Evaluation is the same thing. When you say review, evaluation is the same thing. Project review, project evaluation. We are talking about the same thing. So, of course, at that stage now, the second stage, during the completion of the project, you need to look back and see what you set out to do is exactly what you've achieved. So in that case, you compare now the product of the project against the objectives. Against the objectives. Well, good. Right. Then you can be able to establish, okay, at the beginning of the project, this were my objective. These were the things I set out to achieve. Right. Now, at the end, you must reflect back and see, have I achieved what I set out to achieve? If not, why? You see, it might not be necessarily for you to correct what is wrong, but for future use, that when you got a same replica or similar project in future, you take it as a lesson learned. That is what you are doing in your eyesight. You document it. This was how what I did, right? This was how I planned. This was how I set out to do, and these are the results. So now, if the results are good or were good, then you raise a thumb up for yourself. Say, well done. Right. So whenever you have a future project of the same, you replicate it because you've done so well. Right? Something that is done well, you don't keep it. There's what we call good practice. If there is an element of good practice, you replicate it. Replicate means you do continue using the same method. If perhaps, of course, there could be some areas that you didn't do well, then you tell yourself, okay, then you zoom in. What really went wrong that you couldn't do well? Then you try to find answers to where, like in your eyesight, then you ask yourself, what could I have done more better? Or could I have done more better for me to be able to achieve what I set out to achieve? Then you try to interrogate, you brainstorm, you write down. For future project, you know what to do now. So that is what project evaluation is all about. It's three stages, right? In the project. Does it make sense to you? So that is what we are doing. It's very, very important. Because, for example, if you done a project and you don't care to go and establish whether the projects are achieving the objectives, you wasted your time, right? Even if your project is not doing what it's supposed to do, you wouldn't know. Then you continue. Okay, remember I've given you two stages there. I haven't given you the last one, right? The last one we call this post-Amstel, like postmortem, right? Postmortem is when you, let's say somebody is dead, you want to find out the cause of the death. But here, it's not like that. What it means is, After 6 months that you've completed the project, you will now come back to review the project to see if the project have achieved its outcomes, the impact, what impact of that project in the perhaps in the community. You're right. Because when you are doing a project, you see, there's a kind of what we call logic framework, right? Where you have the input, right? Then you have the activities, then you have the result, then you have the outcomes, then you talk about the impact. The last one is sustainability. I know what I'm saying is a bit advanced, but no, right. You see, because when you look at it, we call it a logic framework of a project. It starts when you are doing evaluation, project review. Then you first of all look at the inputs, right? Which the resources that were utilized. Then you look at the activities, the works that were done. Then you look at the result, what was produced as a result of what were done. Then you look at the outcomes. Outcomes is the what has been achieved, right? Then you look at the impact. Impact is how the result of the project, what has been achieved, is able to transform people's life. You see, so when you finish with the outcomes now, then you talk about sustainability. Is this something that can keep on going even when the resources to the project is withdrawn? You know, so that is, if we are doing evaluation, that is how evaluation goes. But what I'm saying is just for your knowledge sake, right? Yeah. So nobody gonna ask you about that, the logic framework, right, or the logic of the framework for project evaluation. So, by virtue of what we are going to do or what you need to know as far as project evaluation is concerned, I've introduced you to some of the vocab, right? Methodology, which is a standardized approach that one can deploy in the doing a task, right? The recommendation, of course, you know what is the recommendation is, right? Suggestion on how to make something better, right? For example, when you do a project review, right? If there are certain areas that were not done properly, you need to produce an articulated or actionable recommendation. Why do I call it actionable? When you articulate or when you formulate a recommendation, it should be something that is doable. Do you understand? And it should be something doable within a certain framework. So I'm not going to bug you with that because it's beyond your scope, right? Okay. So yeah, that is what we are talking about recommendation. For example, now I'm busy with a project now whereby I'm reviewing what some other people have done. So when I look at the lessons learned, you see, guys, can I tell you something? This thing is very important. Right. Like I said, I'm busy working on a project now, project evaluation, right? Whereby, we got different case studies, different countries, right? We're dealing with 11 countries. The submitting report and part of the one that is reviewing some of their report. So when I'm reviewing their report, I look at the lessons learned, methodology, everything. I look at the lessons learned. Okay. Then I look at the recommendation. Some of the recommendations that I've reviewed so far doesn't have a time frame. I said, no, you cannot do recommendation like this. If you say, okay, this is what must be done, you recommend it should be done within a specific time frame, and there should be specific outcomes. Yeah. That what I'm trying to say now is this aspect is very, very important. Project evaluation. At my stage, I'm still getting involved in this thing. And this one can give you money. Right? So it's very important. Then postmortem, I have explained to you project evaluation. So project evaluation is a research base, right? It's not something that you can just sit in the office and started. formulating report for a project. Say you are evaluating a project. No, you must go out there to collect data, evidence based, right? What it means is to involve all stakeholders, people that got interest, right, in the project. Remember what we talk about stakeholders, people that can be affected either positively or negatively as a result of the project, right? So you must involve them because they are the one that are going to be in better position to speak the truth. You see what I mean? For example, the community. Let's say the community, the beneficiaries. If the project is not done properly, or if the outcomes of the project is not aligned with the project objectives or are not achieved, the beneficiary will tell you, say, they say they're going to give us houses. We are not getting the house. We've been waiting. Some of us that have got the houses, perhaps they will tell you that the quality of the houses are not good. When it's raining, when you see, it's like as if you are outside. The roof are leaking. You know all those type of stuff. Yeah, you involve them as well. The project manager, people that did it, you need to involve them. You collect data from different people, from the key stakeholders. Then after that, you analyze it for you to be able to produce an informed decision-making report. Okay, yeah. Mold. What is causing the mold is when there's lack of aeration. No ventilation, it's not well ventilated. That is what is causing mold. Right. Yeah. And I've got, I've got a chemical to remove mold. So maybe you can speak to me later. Yeah, that is a very good question. So, having done your project evaluation, you need to produce a report, right? So that report is what we call project evaluation report. It's very, very important because it will help you to make an informed decision. Okay, let me tell you something else, right? Relating to this, to galvanize what I'm saying that project evaluation is important. You see, not only construction or whatever, let's say government policies, government policies. The government could have policies, they could have programs. You do evaluate government programs to see whether it's working. So if it is not working, you can make a recommendation. For example, like this NSFAS that you are receiving now, one could evaluate it, institute a kind of an evaluation to see whether it's working. People that are getting this NSFAS, are they the right people to get it? Right? The money, the government, taxpayers' money that is being put in NSFAS, what is the outcome? What is the impact in the community, in the life of people? You see, you can do a kind of evaluation to review it. Then, after the evaluation, then you will be in a position to tell the government that, okay, it's working. A lot of people are, it's changing lives of so many people because that is what the government is part of the objectives of NSFAS program to make sure that it reach the ones that are really in need. At the end of the day, being able to change people's life, the impact. Then, if we want to interrogate further, you look at the sustainability of NSFAS. Will it be able to sustain itself? Right. At this point in time, if I'm to answer that one, I will say it's questionable. It's questionable because will the government be able to sustain, keep on paying NSFAS based on the economic condition of the country? So I'm not saying you must answer that, but it's questionable. All those kind of stuff. So how will you be able to provide informed, decisive answers, right, or credible answers to such questions? You do a kind of evaluation to produce a report. Right. Okay, that is what we are talking about. Right. So we said, there are a lot of things to learn here. I like this aspect in project management. I won't deceive you. I love this aspect. Very nice. Right? Like I said, you can make money from this. if you know how to do project evaluation. Because there are a lot of project policies, programs, interventions that you can evaluate. And you know why the government is failing? Jonga, there is one thing I want to digress a little bit now, but not too much. Still within the confinement of what we are saying here. There are a lot of evaluations being done in the country, but you still see programs that are ineffective, inefficient. You know why? Because once the problem with evaluation in this country is the implementation of evaluation outcomes. When you evaluate, you give them a report, they don't implement, they don't plow it back to the implementation program. They keep it aside. So that is one problem. There was a time I went to University of Free State to present some of the shortcomings of evaluation. You know, it was I think it was February, March this year. Yes, I was in Free State, University of Free State, to present a paper on the shortcomings of evaluation, monitoring and evaluation. It was quite lovely, you know. Yeah. So we said project evaluation is usually carried out by an external person. Of course, why? Because you want the evaluation to be fair. You don't want it to be full of biasness. You know, when somebody is biased, you see, for example, yourself cannot evaluate you as part of the project internally, directly involved in the project. You cannot evaluate yourself because the it will not be credible, of course, because you will not like to shoot yourself on the foot. If you see anything that is wrong, you wouldn't like to expose it. You quickly just sweep it under the carpet. They mustn't see this. Then your report now will be biased. You are going to put sweet stuff that people want to hear. I achieved this, I achieved this. You wouldn't say I didn't achieve this, right? Right. So that is that. Then you need to make sure that you involve the stakeholders. And this is another problem that happens in government department. Hello, focus. This thing we are talking about is very important. It happens in government department. When you are done with your evaluation, you produce a report. If the boss there, the manager, have seen that there are certain things that were not right, they're gonna sit on the report. It happens in government department because they don't want people to. It's like as if you are exposing them, which was it's not supposed to be so, because an evaluation is to correct things, right? To make things right. Okay. Then we say project are evaluated against objectives. We talk about that, right? Time, quality, resources, and information. So the purpose is to assist in determining the major problems encountered during the project life cycle and the lessons learned for the future. Are you getting it? Why you tinkling here? Please, you mustn't do that. Right, guys, listen. Hello, look at me. Don't look somewhere. Look at only me. Don't look anywhere. You must look at me. Right. These are the principles of evaluation. Very important. Right. It must be impartial, right? And independent. That is what I'm saying, that you cannot evaluate yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be partial. You know, partiality. Partiality, you favoritism. You're going to favor yourself. You don't be fair, right? Because you're going to say, how can I shoot myself on the foot? Nobody can do that. You know how painful it is to shoot yourself on the foot, right? So you won't like that to happen, right? Neither will you allow it or you will be trusted to happen to somebody close to you. So, hello, focus. Then it must be credible in the sense that evaluator should be somebody that is knowledgeable in the field of evaluation or in that concern or field that needs to be evaluated. For example, if there's a project in medical line, you are not a doctor, you cannot go and evaluate that. Or you cannot appoint an evaluator who is a medical doctor to go and evaluate a program that is based on construction. You see? So You must have the evaluators that got the right experience and expertise, and the process must be transparent, right? Transparent, for example, like I said, it must be research based, right? Then people must know about what you are looking for, and you must make sure that people that are involved are the key stakeholders. The processes must be fair, right? Then a distinction should be drawn between the findings and the recommendation. These are the findings, what you observe, and how can we correct the shortcomings, if any. Of course, there will always be shortcomings. You know what I mean by shortcomings? Yeah. Okay. Then it must be useful. Hello, focus. You getting distracted? Please, as a brief. It must be useful, right? You know, to do an evaluation is money, it's cost intensive, right? So you wouldn't like a situation whereby you waste taxpayers' money to do a kind of evaluation, and at the end of the day, it's not going to be useful. So the report of the evaluation, as we said, must be evidence based and it must be useful, right? Being able to help the situation. Then present information clearly and it should be timely and allow for decision making. Right. Of course, okay. Why are you coming now? You're very late, right? Then the last one is involving the stakeholders. It must involve all the whole stakeholders, right? The key stakeholders. Key. You know what I mean by key stakeholders? People that, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, people that finance it and people that are concerned. Yeah, concerned, key stakeholders. For example, you cannot go and interview somebody that doesn't even know about the project. So the ones that know about the project based on their experience, right? That can provide a good insight of the project. Those are the ones that you interview. That is why we call them key stakeholders. Does it make sense to you? Like key, key. They are the main guy, the main people, right? Are you getting what I'm saying? Okay. I see you are very excited. Right. Of course, you should be excited because this topic is very exciting. Right. Hmm. It can be so soon. Huh? Man. Okay. All right. Tomorrow is the period over. Okay. Now tomorrow we're gonna continue from here. Huh?